And how does geography shape regional integration in Latin America?
Here in South America, we have like the two of the biggest river basins in the world. The Amazon River Basin. 20% of the fresh water running through the oceans come from the Amazon River. We have, in South America, have one of the biggest aquifers of the world, the Guarani Aquifer system. The water governance must be transboundary.
So you mentioned the sub-basin level, there's also the national level, the regional level, perhaps even the global level.
So you can talk about this global agreements, but if you're talking about surface water, you are talking about a river basin. Many of the conflicts occurs in the subnational area. We are trying to understand more about the flying rivers.
So when we're talking about, for example, Brazil negotiating with Paraguay or Uruguay or other cases where we see power asymmetries, how do these power asymmetries affect negotiations over water governance? And
in other times, Brazil can be very harsh with its economic power. You can see a lot of the lobby of the energy sector in Brazil.
Speaking about the Itaipu Dam, are there some lessons that we can learn from this case?
It's a little bit difficult to be effective.
Welcome to New Regional Orders, a podcast by the Center for Regional Integration. I'm your host and the Center's founding director, Ivo Ganchev. In this episode, I'm pleased to share the first part of a two-part conversation with Dr. Luis Paulo Batista da Silva, a geographer from
Fluminense Federal University,
who was previously at the University of Sao Paulo and at the Federal University of Bahia. He is a co-editor of the recent volume New Perspectives on Transboundary Water Governance, Interdisciplinary Approaches and Global Case Studies. And he has also published widely in many edited journals and books, such as Geoforum and Climate and Development. Luis's work spans hydropolitics, transboundary river basins, and climate governance, among other relevant topics. In this episode, which, as I mentioned, is the first part of a two-part conversation, Luis and I explore the role of geography in shaping regional integration in Latin America, with a special focus on transboundary water governance. We discuss the successes and shortcomings of treaties and organizations in managing shared resources like the La Plata River Basin and the Guarani Aquifer, the challenges of multi-level governance, and the influence of power asymmetries in negotiations, where, of course, Brazil's role looms large. It's an intriguing discussion that connects territory, environment, and politics in ways that reveal both the achievements and unresolved challenges of regional cooperation in South America. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting platform. Now let's roll the intro and get started. Welcome to the show.
Ivo Ganchev, Beijing-based academic, executive, and a consultant.
I wanted to try a new theory on you.
Esa es una pregunta para un examen de grado.
Go to the communities and listen to people,
Exploring change across the borders. Welcome to New Regional Orders.
Luis, welcome to the podcast, and thanks very much for making the time to see me in Rio.
Thank you, Ivo. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope I can bring some interesting topics for Latin America and geography of Latin America in this Friday pre-carnival.
Yeah, right before the carnival.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about regionalism, which is, I guess, the main topic of this podcast. Regionalism is a very broad topic, and different people look at it from different perspectives. I've interviewed political scientists that are concerned about state actors, institutions, balance of power, and so on. I've interviewed lawyers who analyze the treaties and the legal frameworks that govern the regional organizations. But you're the first geographer that I'm interviewing for this podcast. As a geographer, from your perspective, what are the key aspects of regionalism that you study in your work? And how does geography shape regional integration in Latin America?
It's interesting, Ivo. As a geographer, I'm very interested in the territory, where this process, the treaties, where they are based, where the material aspects of this arrangements take place. And actually, the Latin American geography is very interested in the territory, this concept. It's very important and very developed in different perspectives. It's the local based communities and how the states take the territories in the regionalist process. So actually, more precisely, in my research, I'm interested in understanding and in assessing how this process of regionalism take place in the border region of South America, and how the economic, political, and especially environmental process of regional integration change and affect the territories in this area of the division of the countries. If I can take some examples, for instance, in my master dissertation, I was looking in understanding how the economic regional integration in South America was affecting some twin cities located between Brazil and Bolivia. And it's interesting to see how infrastructure and this development process completely change some cities, but this changing it depends on how Bolivia and Brazil process and materialize the process in the border region. So actually, geography, I believe it's interesting because it's not just about the location of where the process, and geography is interested in the content of the territory, the demographically, environmentally, and culturally, how these territories are composed and how this affects the process of regionalism.
Sure, that's definitely a new perspective as far as this podcast is concerned. Now, let's talk a little bit about some aspects of Latin American geography. Rivers and aquifers cross national borders. They require cooperation between countries, and they impact multiple stakeholders. You focused on an area that's referred to as transboundary water governance in the literature. Can you explain what this term entails? Why is it particularly important for Latin America to pay attention to this? And what are the key locations or areas where we see this need for cooperation in terms of transboundary water governance?
Yeah. And Ivo, it is very important because actually the water governance refers to this broad sense of the political, legal, institutional frameworks that act in managing and regulating the use of water. So it must be cross-sector. Some data is important in in South America. It's important. Take the example of Brazil. Actually, Brazil has 6% of its energy comes from the rivers, hydropower. Agriculture in Brazil uses, the figures change, but between 50 to 70% of the water. And we have huge cities. We have all the environmental services that the rivers and wetlands play. So the water governance must be cross-sector, take place of all this the sectors. And here in South America, we have like two of the biggest river basins in the world. The Amazon River Basin is the biggest river basin in the world. It's important, it's impressive to understand that 20% of the fresh water running through the oceans come from the Amazon River. So in terms of the fresh water of the world, the surface of fresh water, it's very important. We have, in South America, we have one of the biggest aquifers of the world, the Guarani Aquifer system. So yeah, in South America, water it connects almost all the countries of the region, and the water governance must be transboundary. For taking these three examples, the Amazon River Basin, the La Plata River Basin, and the Guarani Aquifer.
You've mentioned all of these transboundary water systems, and I'm guessing it's quite difficult to figure out how do you manage these resources, how do you share them. There's a lot of particularly different interests that might come into play when you talk about the national sovereignty of countries, the interests of different governments, corporate interests, economic interests, environmental sustainability, and so on. Could you highlight some of the biggest success stories when it comes to transboundary water governance, and also explain some of the most pressing challenges that we're seeing these days?
Yeah, first I think that success, it depends on the values and goals of each moment we are talking about. So, for instance, the 1969 La Plata River Basin Treaty, it's one of the first in South America to treaty to talk about and regulate transboundary waters. It's still nowadays seen as a very successful example, but for the perspective of that time. So it avoided the conflict between Brazil and Argentina. During that time, during the dictatorship of that moment, was in a little bit of disputes, in hegemonic disputes in the region. So the treaty avoided the conflict. It prepared the political institutional frameworks for the construction of Itaipu Dam and other dams. So you can see as a successful example, but this treaty in the 20th century does not take any stance or anything about environmental perspectives and how to manage it, how to bring sustainability to this water system. So nowadays you can take other examples. For instance, in the Guarani Aquifer Agreement. So from a different perspective, in another time, in another period, it brings some environmental agenda to the discussion. This is important nowadays, but still, as we were talking about the challenges, and it's still difficult to implement what the provisions of the treaties and agreements taking regarding sustainability. The joint management is still difficult, and overall the implementation of these treaties it's still a little bit challenging nowadays. If I can give another example, one of the pathways, one of the paths that's going through the last 10 years of the regarding water, it's the sub-basins treaties. We have some examples in sub-basins shared between Brazil and Paraguay, Brazil and Uruguay, but the same. Implementation is still difficult, especially regarding this sovereign and the national territory. It's still very, the border, it's a really strong discourse, it's really strong perspective.
Yeah, I can imagine it's easier to agree on something than to actually do it and put it in practice. Now, there is transboundary water governance operating at different levels. So you mentioned the sub-basin level, there's also the national level, the regional level, perhaps even the global level. Can you explain how governance functions at these levels when it comes to managing water resources, and what are the advantages and limitations of each, and the way perhaps that they interact with one another, and when you're choosing which level to work at, how do you do that?
Yes, this is really difficult, and I guess it's one of the striking questions of water governance in geography, how to manage this multiple scales and make this converge some sustainable and equitable way to manage water. If you think about the national scales, the state has a huge power to implement policies, to make the institutions work. So it's a very one of the biggest. It's the level empowered to make the international level works. But if you see, it's interesting, especially regarding surface water, how they are regional in a sense. So you can talk about this global agreements, but if you're talking about surface water, you are talking about a river basin, probably. Amazon composed of 9 countries, the La Plata Basin with 5 countries. So we're talking about in a regional scale. So and how people use water. So that connects to what I was talking about in the first question. That in geography we are interested in the territory, how this process of using water are taking place. So then we must look at the subnational, regional, and local levels. But it depends a lot of the federal organization of each country. So if you can take the example of Brazil. Brazil has this federalism divided in 3, the national, the state level, and the municipal level. The state level has a good they're capable. They have a lot of capabilities and empowerment to implement their policies, but they can't make agreements. Or it's a very new process of power diplomacy to make the state level making agreements with the other countries. It's still a lot of in process. And if you can talk about this process of the conflicts about water, many of the conflicts occurs in the subnational area, because it's where the institutions, the stakeholders are engaged in the same place. They might talk, they might do politics, and they might establish agreements between each other. So they can handle a lot of different strategies, lobbying, and to make this happen. As example, if you can take in this case, national river basin here in Brazil, the San Francisco River Basin, is one of the biggest river basins here in Brazil, and use it by agriculture a lot, hydropower, irrigation, and so all these stakeholders are engaged together in the river basin organizations. So they are doing their lobbies, and they are going there to come for their interest. It's different in the international level, where the national state it's the main voice to speak. You were talking about a global level. You can think about a global level. But we're not talking about the surface or the groundwater. But if you think about the atmospheric water, the moisture, they're circulate. They have a more They have a more global level, or at least continental way of organizations. Here, we are in South America. We are trying to understand more about the flying rivers. If I can say a little bit of the flying rivers, it's this atmospheric waters that pumps up from the rainforest, especially from the Amazon, and then the winds and that comes from the ocean take it and to cross South America and brings rain to the southeast part of the South America. So there are not anyone talking about how to govern this water. And in the last years we are seeing many forest fires and droughts, and these atmospheric rivers are very important in this conversation. So still a lot of gaps to understand how these levels they can be managed together and how these levels might be assessed by the national, subnational, and local governments.
Yeah, these are really fascinating insights, and especially when you talk about the flying rivers, it's something that I guess it really hasn't entered the mainstream discourse yet, but it might turn out to be a very important issue over time. Now, when we talk about negotiations regarding water governance, when you work between governments, you see a lot of power imbalances. So when we're talking about, for example, Brazil negotiating with Paraguay or Uruguay, or other cases where we see power asymmetries, how do these power asymmetries affect negotiations over water governance, and what mechanisms are there to ensure fair cooperation, if any? And also, more broadly, how do you think these power asymmetries affect the general dynamic of regional integration in Latin America?
We're not talking just about the environmental topics such as water, but in general, it depends a lot of the balance of power between South American countries, depends a lot of the national, the regional context of power of the national governments. For instance, we had a period of the dictatorships, of military dictatorships here in South America. So they had their, if I was talking about the La Plata River Basin Treaty from the 1969, it was during the dictatorship in many of these countries. So they had some interests in common, like in building dams and making the hydro race happen. So they had their interest in making the irrigation programs. So yeah, for instance, that period, in that moment, Brazil and Argentina would manage their differences and to make this treaty happen. But we had another time of this convergence of interests during the 2000s. We are talking about not just the 2000s, but the 1990s with the beginning of the Mercosur and how Mercosur grew up in power and economic power. And the 2000s with this left-wing government in South America, and they created the UNASUR and other organizations. So in that moment, you can say that Brazil used its political, economical, and influence to make these organizations happen. But in other times, Brazil can be very harsh with its economic power. One example, we are talking about the current negotiations about Itaipu Dam, the renegotiations about Itaipu Dam. If I can say a little bit about this, the Itaipu Dam, the treaty that regulates the dam, the binational dam shared between Brazil and Paraguay, was signed 50 years ago. In the treaty, it said that they must renegotiate the terms of how to sell power, how much paid for each other. The negotiations are happening right now. Yesterday, the chancellor said that they are going to end this negotiation by May. But still, in Paraguay, it's a public sense topic of the Itaipu, because it's everywhere, Itaipu in Paraguay. So you can see the newspaper, you can see during the elections, everybody's talking about Itaipu. Brazil, it's not so public, the discussions about Itaipu, but still you can see a lot of the lobby of the energy sector in Brazil, pressuring for getting lower price for the energy, and this is affecting much of how Brazil is going to the table for negotiations with Paraguay, and how the pressure that the pressure that Brazil is going to do to Paraguay to get the prices of the energy that Brazil wants. So yeah, in this specific case, Brazil can be very pushing and very hard power.
Yeah, that's I guess is something that a lot of the smaller countries should keep in mind when they're negotiating these agreements. Speaking about the Itaipu Dam, are there some lessons that we can learn from this case in terms of hydro diplomacy, treaty negotiation, or any other aspect? And are there any other important cases like this that you think we should keep in mind or keep an eye on?
Yes, I believe that it is an important case, especially because we are seeing that it's a coming and going news about the shared dams that Brazil and Bolivia are willing to build in the Guaporé River, the Amazon River basin. So yeah, this idea, it's from the 1980s, but it was harder, it was more present during this shared moments of in Brazil and Bolivia when Evo was in power in Bolivia and Lula in Brazil, but it got a bit colder, and now it's coming back again, this idea to build 2 dams in the Amazon River basin. The first lesson I would take from the Itaipu, that one dam like that, it's not possible to be built again, because it's a massive dam. It's still one of the biggest. It's the second in terms of the. I believe it's the second biggest after the 3 gorges, and it's flooded one of the most beautiful waterfalls in the world, the 7 Falls, and it's a lot of indigenous people that had to leave their places by the flooded areas, such as many peasants in the region. So when we're talking about during the dictatorship, this kind of problems were not spoke loud, but now we have to be aware of this process. So I believe the first lesson that such a big dam could not be built nowadays. I just say that, but Belo Monte in the Amazon was built. Santo Antônio Geral, 2 other huge dams were built in the Amazon by a left-wing government in Brazil. So taking this, we are talking about the 70s and these 2 dams in the Amazon into 2000s. I might say that the lessons were not learned because a lot of people were taking from the land for building, a lot of environment impact, a lot of social and human impact of these dams that first said. But if you're talking about the diplomatic aspect of the dams, if you talk to in Paraguay, people are still very angry about the agreement made, that it's unfair, and how Brazil takes the big revenue and take the big lots of the energy. I believe talking about regional integration, in fact, I have to talk about how to split this energy and this output of this kind of dam. If they are going to be built, if they might be built again, but I don't think it's such a massive dam might be built again.
Let's talk about some of the treaties and organizations that have governed, I guess, Latin America and South America in particular, is transboundary waters. We've seen the Plata Basin Treaty that you've spoken about, the Guarani Aquifer Agreement. We also have the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, or ACTO, as well. So we have a lot of these agreements and also some aspects of organizations such as Mercosur, which deals a little bit, I guess, with environmental governance in a way. In your view, what makes a treaty or an environmentally focused organization or even a department of an existing larger organization effective? And what are some examples of effective or ineffective initiatives within these organizations?
I believe this is a topic won't speak for myself, but for the literature in water governance, that one of the topics of what makes a river basin organization effective, it's a clear and narrow focus on some goals and objectives. Do not be so broad and trying to assess and take parts of being everywhere of the river basin. But it's in contradiction with the idea of integrated water management. So the idea that for managing water you have to manage land and the land that comes to the river channel. But even though it's the most effective river basin organization, try to narrow your focus, like for instance in navigation and hydropower, for instance. In terms of effectiveness, they are really effective. They can manage this kind of actions. If we are speaking about the river basin organizations here in South America, if you talk about the river basin organization created after the La Plata River Basin Treaty, that's called CIC, C-I-C. It has a lot of different goals, but still, what they can do, it's very small projects in some case studies or one aspect of navigation in the river. Nevertheless, there are some conflicts happen in this precise topics. Last year, for instance, Argentina started to put some tolls for tolls. If you see the La Plata River basins, Argentina is at the mouth of the river basin. You have Paraguay and Bolivia, two landlocked countries. Imagine a toll for Paraguay and Bolivia. It's a very sensitive topic. It's very geopolitically, geoeconomically, it's very important for Paraguay and Bolivia, and Argentina did it. Even with a river basin organization interested in managing the navigation of the Paraguay River and in Paraná River, they can't avoid Argentina doing so. If you're talking about this bigger organizations such as Mercosur that has some environmental coordination, I guess, it's still very dependent of the willingness of the countries. We had one example is known as the pulp mills conflict between Argentina and Uruguay, when the Uruguay wanted to build two paper mills factories in their riverbanks in the Uruguay River, and Argentina complained. This process went to the ICJ in Netherlands, but the complaining went to the Mercosur as well. But Mercosur didn't have the capabilities and the skills, the tools to manage this conflict. So it was a little bit difficult to manage this process and this conflict during that time. A few years ago, Uruguay started again to implement other paper mills, and Argentina was okay. I can't complain a lot. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to be effective. And if I might say, in a different perspective, if you were talking about since the 1990s, when this environmental agenda gets some moment, we start to see some. I was talking about this local level river basin organization, not organizations, but tacit agreements between stakeholders. I have studied a case in the Brazil-Uruguay border. It's the Guarani River Basin. It's an affluent of the Uruguay River, and the Brazil-Uruguay border. It's a kind of it's a very merged area. Culturally, they have a lot of cultural and familiar bonds. So they, and this is an area of cattle range, mostly for cattle range, but there are a lot of rice crops as well, floated by the water. And the farmers in both sides, in Brazil and Uruguay, started to organize themselves to manage this water. And during the 90s and 2000s, a lot of droughts happened in this area, and they managed locally to organize themselves to make some quotas for water for going to all the farmers. Afterwards, this was stated in binational agreement signed in 1991. This agreement stated to create a river basin organization, but this never happened. The national state did implement what they are calling, but in the local level, in the territory, the farmers were working for making this governance happen. In fact, so this is interesting. How sometimes they don't need the national state, despite the national state, despite the offices, the foreign offices, they implement the water governance, transboundary water governance.
Yeah, that really makes you wonder, to some extent, how necessary are governments and regional organizations to solve these conflicts? Is it possible for the local authorities and communities to actually find a way forward? Now, you've spoken about quite a number of countries here. So let's stick to this conversation about the countries and focus a little bit on Brazil. Obviously, it's the largest country in South America. It has the most economic and political influence. It has tremendous geographic features. When you think about water governance, how important of a policy priority is this for Brazil? Where does it rank when you think of policy priorities here? And does Brazil want to lead the region in terms of perhaps water governance or in general as well? Because we've seen sort of different attitudes coming from different governments throughout the years.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is a priority, the national government of Brazil regarding water governance, transboundary water governance. As I spoke a little bit with the diplomatic staff, most of them doesn't know a lot of the geography of Brazil. So one of the problems I was telling you about the Guarani River Basin was how the diplomatic staff didn't know about the region. So they go to the border regions, start to work doing the agreements to put on paper, but as soon they do the agreements, the letters, they leave. And this doesn't make a continuous process of engagement of offices in both sides of the border. So I don't believe it's a very urgent perspective in the Brazilian administration. But actually, I don't know. I believe it's going to be, because we're seeing a lot of small tensions happening, and you're talking about the last 3 years with huge droughts in Amazon River Basin, and the effects of the flying rivers I was talking about, and how the deforestation in Brazil, how they affect our neighbors here by the deforestation occurring here, how the flying rivers doesn't making rain in Bolivia and Paraguay and Colombia and Peru, all the Andean countries, Argentina. And moreover, I was talking about the navigation, a lot of small tensions that if we are having to think in another scale, in another perspective, we have to think on this agenda to put in this problem of water governance in the national agenda, especially thinking about how Brazil is important in globally and regionally. If you think in this connection that river basin brings our mind, it's important. If you would have the Amazon River Basin in mind, we have to think what's happening in the Andes and how this affects cities like Manaus and Belém, or what's happening in São Paulo. How this now talking about the La Plata River Basin. If you're thinking about São Paulo, how this affects cities like Buenos Aires or Montevideo, because they are connected, they're interconnected. So it breaks thinking about this river, this connection, these flows of the river basin. Might we think about the urgency to break this idea of this very specific and divided nation states and how they're interconnected?
Yeah, this really makes you rethink, I guess, the function of national borders, or the extent to which they matter in some ways. Now, you shared with us, I think, a very important insight that water governance is perhaps not always of the highest priority for Brazil's government or foreign office. But let's also talk a little bit about Brazil more broadly. Does Brazil really want to lead Latin America in terms of perhaps deepening the integration in the region, or bearing, I guess, more of the cost of regional governance in general? And how does Brazil think about, I guess, the role, or in some ways the rise of other countries economically in Latin America, such as Mexico, or other traditional, I guess, leaders of sorts such as Argentina? How does Brazil view these countries as rivals, competitors, friends, or in another way, not just in terms of water governance, but more broadly?
Yeah, as I was saying, I see different moments of this regional integrations. Brazil was more keen for exerting this role, I believe, during the 2000s, and it's bringing the 1990s and 2000s with projects of regional integration by infrastructure and fostering the trade between countries and political connections. This was a little bit broke by other governments from more right-wing politics like Bolsonaro, that didn't have a South American or Latin America agenda. But I'm not seeing this perspective of regional integration coming back again in this current organization, because there are the leaderships in the region are very set apart. You have some binational, then I guess some binational connections between countries with more convergency, as I was talking, and others a little bit different. You see, like Argentina nowadays are talking a little nothing about regional integration, how they are connected with our region. But still a lot of work to be done in this, and not just in terms of infrastructure or economic bonds between the South American countries, but I believe it culturally, politically, to work together in this a more complex world that we have nowadays.